With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of True Crime with Caitlyn. Today's case is a one that since I first heard about it all the way back in 2019, I have never been able to get it off my mind. I recently came across an article about how this killer is inundated with love letters, admirers, people reaching out to him wanting to form friendships and relationships with him. I think that maybe people are forgetting just how evil this man is, because if I ever sent him a letter, it would consist of 2 words, and I'll let you use your imagination on what them words would be. And so with today's episode, I'm going to give everyone a reminder on just how evil Chris Watts is. This is the case of the Watts family murders. Shanann Catherine Ruzek was born on the 10th of January 1984 in Clifton, New Jersey. 2 years later, her little brother Frankie was born, and the siblings were incredibly close. Their parents are Frank, who had his own home improvement business, and Sandra, who went by the nickname Sandy, worked within a hair salon. At some point, the family up and moved from New Jersey, moving to North Carolina. Growing up, Shanann was quite a quiet, reserved, bit of an insecure girl, and sadly, this made her the target of bullies at her high school. Whenever he could, Frankie would always intervene to protect his older sister. However, more often than not, this resulted in him getting into fights. It wasn't until she joined the drama club that Shanann really started to blossom. She started to come into herself, and she developed so much confidence. She did all of the work backstage, making sure that every single thing was perfect. She would spend hours of her own time staying behind after school to help make props and costumes, paint backgrounds, etc. If she was doing something, she was going to make sure that it was right. The drama club was almost like Shanann's safe space, and she made so many friends in there. She was extremely close with her drama teacher, and she would confide in him about any worries that she had, any struggles that she was going through, if anything was going on in her home life, which I think having a trusted adult that you can confide in is really healthy. In general, Shanann radiated this glow of happy energy. She never excluded or made anyone feel left out. She was sort of the mother of the friendship group. One of her friends would later recall a time when everyone were out eating together and he accidentally spilled a drink on his trousers. This left him feeling humiliated because it looked like that he had wet himself, and Shanann, seeing this, sussing on to how he was feeling, picked up her own drink and poured it all over herself. The group erupted into laughter, and soon enough, every single person was drenched, having their drinks thrown at each other. In her final year at school, Shanann met a man named Leonard, who she thought was the love of her life, and the pair married shortly after graduating. Their relationship was rocky though. Shanann was brought up by 2 incredibly hard workers, and in turn, she was a very hard worker herself. During this marriage, she ran 2 shops as the manager, and she would often spend late nights, if not all night, working around the clock. This, amongst other things, caused a strain on the marriage, and the pair ended up going through a pretty awful divorce. I can imagine that going through a divorce is absolutely awful. At one point, you're at one end of the spectrum, marrying someone, vowing to spend the rest of your life with them, you are in love with them, to then the other end of the spectrum. You can't resolve your problems and you can no longer be together. Shanann would later say that this divorce took everything from her. her happiness and her confidence, her drive, but she fought tooth and nail to get all of that back. One of her dreams in life was that she always wanted to build her own house, and at only 25 years old, she did just that. And the house was absolutely amazing. It was huge. There was 12 rooms, 4 beds, 4 baths, with a balcony overlooking the beautiful Lake Wylie. This was one of Shanann's biggest accomplishments, and she had worked her backside off for every single bit of it. Sadly though, she couldn't really enjoy her new home for long. She went from being super happy and bubbly, energetic, to feeling poorly all of the time. Her hair began to fall out, she gained almost 2 stone in a month, and she always felt miserable, depressed, down in the dumps. This is when she would be diagnosed with lupus. Lupus is a long-term condition that causes joint pain, skin rashes, and tiredness. Shanann would say that this was when she was at her lowest point. She lost friends due to her invisible illness. She would have erratic mood swings, and she was tired all of the time, so much so that she actually had to quit her job where she had been working for almost a decade. It was during this very low period in her life when she received an unexpected friend request on Facebook from a man named Chris Watts. She accepted, thinking that they were never going to meet, and initially she didn't even respond to any of his messages, but she eventually thought, why not, and so the two began talking. Christopher Lee Watts was born on the 16th of May 1985 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He was the second child of Cindy and Ronnie Watts, and he had an older sister named Jamie. They were considered an upper middle class family. Ronnie worked hard within a car dealership, and Cindy had a good job working in the finance sector. The Wattses were a very close-knit family, and Chris would bond with his dad over their shared love of cars. People would even say that Chris mirrored his dad's personality, being very respectful, quiet, soft-spoken, and friendly. The family attended the Baptist church, where Chris was instilled with almost a fear of God. He was really worried about upsetting God and being sent to hell, and Cindy would say that she often heard Chris repenting when he thought that he had sinned. At school, Chris would mostly keep his head down, keeping himself to himself and focused on his work, meaning that he usually got pretty good grades. Throughout his childhood and his teenage years, he only really had 2 friends, and so the 3 of them all stuck together, and they were actually friends for years after graduating. In his teen years, Chris would be described as very socially awkward. He didn't really know how to develop friendships and relationships. He had never had a girlfriend, and like I say, he only had those 2 friends. Cindy would say that growing up, Chris was very much involved in sports. He played for a lot of different teams, doing different things. So it's strange that he didn't develop any friendships with any of his teammates, because I'm not a sporty person, but I do feel like I get the vibe that when you play sport together, you develop a bond, you develop a natural relationship. Apparently, that missed Chris. Whenever his friends would go to school dances, discos, or house parties, he would always opt to stay home. He would rather stay behind watching TV, reading a book, or spending time with his grandmother, whom he adored. After graduating high school, Chris was set on achieving his dream of working on car engines for NASCAR, which is like sports racing cars. Sadly though, he didn't manage to pass and get into the circuit, but he didn't dwell on it and he just moved on. He then began working and was really good with his money. He had spent some time saving up and managed to get his own apartment. He built up his own set of tools, which were worth around $25,000, and he really started thinking about his future, making plans on what he wanted to do and what he wanted to achieve. He was excited at the idea of finding the woman of his dreams, and he could not wait to become a father. But, much like in his teen years, as a young adult, Chris was still very socially awkward and didn't form any relationships. He really struggled with this. In 2010, when a cousin of Chris's mentioned that she knew someone that Chris might like, initially he just blew it off, because who wants to take a dating recommendation off of your cousin? You might have, but I know that I never did. This was until the cousin showed Chris a picture of a woman named Shanann Ruzek. When Chris saw this picture, he was blown away and commented that she was the most beautiful girl that he had ever seen. Straight away he took to Facebook, searched up her name and sent her a friend request, which Shanann went on to accept. Here is Shanann describing that time.
Got a friend request from Chris. I was in a really, really, really bad place. And I got a friend request from Chris on Facebook. And I was like, oh, what the heck? I'm never going to meet him. Accept.
After talking for some time, Chris and Shanann ended up meeting. And from what I could read, I don't think she was really feeling him at first. He was his usual self, being quite reserved and awkward. And they didn't have that instantaneous spark. There wasn't an instant click between the two. By this time, Shanann had really come into herself. She was outgoing and she was confident, and so Chris's demeanour seemed quite the opposite. Shanann pushed him away and she rejected Chris over and over. She gave him many opportunities to walk away, but Chris was persistent. He really liked Shanann and he wanted to see her and get to know her more. As described in the book The Perfect Father, written by John Glatt, the couple's first date didn't really go well. They had arranged to go to a posh theatre and Shanann got herself all dressed up, black tie vibes. But then Chris arrived and he was wearing camouflage cargo pants, so he wasn't really dressed appropriately at all. Throughout this date, Chris rarely spoke and it was apparently really awkward. I think coming out of that date, Chris must have known that his chances with Shanann were slipping because they just weren't clicking, it just wasn't happening between them. But in his own words, he was, quote, persistent in trying to pursue her. So he decided to invite her on a more casual setting date and asked Shanann if she would like to go to a concert with him. I do think Shanann must have wanted to give Chris a chance after all this, because they had been talking, they'd been on a couple of dates, and after this concert date, they ended up going on a third date. They went on a trip to Myrtle Beach, and while here, Shanann was overcome with pain caused by a flare-up from her lupus. And when Chris didn't cower away from her, didn't shy away, didn't run for the hills thinking, I don't need to put up with this, instead, he looked after her. He showed Shanann how caring he was. This is when she began to fall for him. She described Chris as only knowing her as she was right then. He knew her when she was at her worst, and he stuck around. He was truly with her through her darkest times, and she would go on to say that she could not have asked God for a better man. Shanann would later talk about her rejecting Chris over and over, and she said, quote, but he stuck around, and he stuck around because he was the one for me.
He is the best thing that has ever happened to me. I'm telling you, when I met Chris, I pushed him away. I gave every excuse for him to run. I mean, I gave him an out every single day. I gave him an out. And if you guys know my story with Chris, you know I gave him an out. I mean, he went to my colonoscopy. I tortured him. I rejected him. I pushed him away time and time and time again. But when I canceled dates last minute, because that's how life is with my health challenges, you cancel things last minute, and it's hard for people to get, it's hard for me to understand. But he stuck around, and he stuck around because he was the one for me. And he is amazing. And I can't tell you how wonderful he is.
Some of Chris's family from the get-go weren't really taken by Shanann. In that book, The Perfect Father, Sandy talks about Cindy and Jamie visiting Shanann's self-built house for the first time, and they were really negative, kind of doubting how Shanann could have afforded something like that, and it seemed like they weren't really keen on Shanann enjoying or liking this kind of extravagant lifestyle. Despite this though, Chris didn't let his family's opinion deter him from Shanann. He would romantically propose to Shanann on a beach, inviting both of their families there to witness him professing his love to her, and of course, Shanann said yes. While planning their engagement party, Jamie asked Shanann if she could do anything to help out. She wanted to be involved, Chris was her baby brother, so Shanann offered her a job of dishing out the invitations. By the time the date of the party came around though, hardly anyone showed up, which took Shanann by surprise. You know, by now she's a considerably popular woman. Both her and Chris have their own friendship groups, so there should have been a good amount of people there. Following the party, she actually rang some people asking why they didn't show, and that is when she was informed that they didn't show because they didn't even know it was happening. They didn't get an invite. This made her really upset with Jamie, furious actually, who said that she wanted to help out, but then didn't even bother to send most of the invites. Jamie does deny this though, saying that she did send them. Shanann and Chris asked Jamie to be the bridesmaid for their wedding and for her daughter to be their flower girl, and she accepted, seeming delighted, the entire engagement party drama being behind them. 1 week before the wedding, Shanann had arranged for the bridal party to all go to a spa. They were going to get pampered, get their nails done, maybe a couple of facials, and one bridesmaid didn't show up. That was Jamie. She said that she couldn't go because she couldn't get out of work, but for Shanann, who was really trying to bond and to connect with her soon-to-be sister-in-law, this really upset her. She had made effort multiple times to get Jamie involved, and on both of the occasions, it seems like Jamie had just slapped her in the face and not even tried. So Shanann told her, don't even bother coming to the wedding. On the 3rd of November 2012, Chris and Shanann got married in North Carolina. Both Chris's parents and his sister didn't attend, even though as far as I could see, his parents were still very much invited. During the party, Frank, who was again Shanann's dad, read out a lovely speech where he said in part, quote, "I couldn't ask for a better man for her. He makes her smile and she makes him smile. God bless you both." Little brother Frankie also made a lovely speech. Here is a clip of that.
I couldn't ask for a better man for her. He makes her smile and she makes him smile. God bless you both.
I just want to say I love you both. You look great together, and she's been looking her whole life for a good guy. I couldn't ask for a better one. I love you guys.
In 2013, after visiting Colorado, both Chris and Shanann completely fell in love with it, and they decided to make the leap. They bought a beautiful 5-bedroom house in the Frederick area. After this, the Wattses began expanding their family, and shortly after their wedding, Shanann fell pregnant. This was truly a miracle because Shanann was told that she couldn't have children, and now that she was pregnant. She was absolutely beaming. She was delighted and so excited. It seems like after going through such a hard time at such a young age, all of the pieces were finally coming together. She was with who she needed to be, where she was supposed to be, and their life was going to be perfect. On the 17th of December 2013, Bella Marie Watts was born, followed by Celeste C.C. Catherine Watts, who was born on the 17th of July 2015. Both of the girls were Shanann's mini-me's. There's a picture that Shanann posted on Facebook where she stood in the mirror putting lip gloss on, and one of the girls is stood underneath her doing the exact same. Both of the girls adored their mother and their father. Shanann would take a video of Bella singing for Chris in the back of the car, and it is equally as devastating as it is beautiful. Hearing how much this little girl loved her dad, and then knowing what he goes on to do.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong. He helped me snuggle too. He reads me books, he ties my shoes. If you're a hero, blue and blue, my daddy, I love you.
Oh, I love.
After Cece was born, Shanann began working from home so that she could be there more for the girls. This is also something that was better for her lupus. She worked for a company called Lavelle selling a weight loss product named Thrive. Thrive is not just a weight loss product, it was also a nutrition supplement which you could get in the form of vitamins, shakes and patches. Lavelle is basically like a pyramid scheme MLM thing, and Shanann was doing really good there. She had over 200 people working underneath her. She actually got so high up in the company that she and Chris were often sent off on many work trips and beautiful holidays. Shanann even won a car, which was a white Lexus. She would use her Facebook account to help boost her sales, and she was basically like an influencer. She was doing what many influencers do today. She shared all aspects of her life with her friends and followers. She showed off the products and what they can do, and she really drew people in with her endearing personality. She was very charismatic and was very much a people person. She loved to share her life through posting pictures, videos, and even doing live streams. For Shanann, she wasn't selling the product that she didn't believe in though. She very much believed in Thrive and absolutely loved the product. She wasn't trying to just flog anything to her followers, making them waste their money on something that wasn't going to work. I know that so many people probably fell in those traps because I know I did when I was younger. I think it was called Slim Fast, where you had to mix the lemon powder in with some water and then drink it, and it was absolutely vile and it did nothing. But that isn't what Shanann was selling. What she was selling, she truly believed in. She would regularly post selfies of herself wearing the Thrive patches, along with pictures of Chris wearing them too. He actually really loved the Thrive products, which helped him lose 7 stone. He would always be wearing at least one of the patches, but most of the time he wore 2. He and Shanann also enjoyed the shakes, and she would post videos of them making and trying all of the different flavours, like a taste test. Chris was still very introverted though, so in the videos he's mostly just there in the background, or Shanann is doing the talking.
Oh yeah.
It's just like mint ice cream. Oh my goodness, this is absolutely amazing. It literally tastes, if you guys have ever had green mint ice cream, it tastes like green mint ice cream, like just like it.
Delicious.
From her account, many people got the impression that the Wattses were the perfect all-American family. Chris was a doting father and a dedicated husband. He had a beautiful wife and the cutest children. They seemed to live a lavish lifestyle, and the couple seemed to genuinely be in love head over heels with one another. But you can't always trust what you see on social media. You never really know what's going on in anyone else's life, what is happening behind closed doors. On the 11th of June 2018, Shanann Watts surprised her husband Chris with her 3rd pregnancy. Having another baby is something that the couple had spoken about, and Chris really wanted to have a little boy, so Shanann really hoped that this baby could be a son for him. She filmed Chris's reaction to the announcement, and she announced it by wearing a grey t-shirt with the words, "Oops, we did it again," printed on the front. When Chris walks into the room, he pauses while he reads the t-shirt, and as it begins to register what it means, he starts smiling and giggling. He tells Shanann that he likes that shirt and that this is awesome news. Looking at the pregnancy test, Chris is smiling and he says, quote, "That's awesome. I guess when you want it to, it happens. Wow." Despite how I just described the video, which makes it sound quite cute, when you watch it, it's actually quite awkward. I don't know if it's just me, but that's just my opinion. It just seems off. I'm going to post a clip here, have a listen, and see what you think.
We did it again. I like that shirt. Really?
Really.
That's awesome. So pink means...
That's just the test.
I know. It just says the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just the test.
That's awesome. Guess when you want to, it happens.
6 days later, on Father's Day, Shanann dedicates a post to Chris where she uploads a collage of pictures, captioning it, quote, "Chris, we are so incredibly blessed to have you. You do so much every day for us and take such great care of us. You are the reason I was brave enough to agree to number 3. From laundry to kids' showers, you are incredible and we are so lucky to have you in our life. Happy Father's Day." At some point in June, it's not confirmed exactly when, while at work, Chris begins to develop a wandering eye, setting his sight on Nicole Kessinger. Nicole worked alongside Chris at Anadarko Petroleum. They didn't work together, but they both worked for the company. She would go and get her dinner from the fridge in the staff room, and this is the first time that Chris lays eyes on her, and according to him, he's completely blown away. One day, he eventually plucks up the courage and goes to her office to speak to her. She would later say that Chris wasn't wearing a wedding ring, made no mention of a wife, and so that's why she entertained him. The two would begin sending each other flirty emails, and just a couple of weeks later, they were going out together. It was shortly after this that a strain began on Chris and Shanann's relationship. Like I said, I'm not exactly sure when this whole thing with Nicole started, but I probably lean towards the start of June because of Chris's reaction to the new pregnancy. I just thought that it was off, and if that's true, imagine what's going through his head. He is just beginning an affair with a woman at work, and now his wife is pregnant. On the 27th of June, Shanann, Bella and Cece all set off for a 6-week-long holiday back to North Carolina, going to visit their family and friends. Halfway through the trip, Shanann took the girls to visit Chris's side of the family, and this is when a huge argument broke out. Cece had an allergy to tree nuts, and anyone with any sort of nut allergy knows how dangerous and fatal a nut allergy can be. Cindy had gone out of her way to buy ice cream which had tree nuts inside. Shanann asked Cindy to not give it to Cece, to keep it far, far away from her, but supposedly Cindy thought this was a good time to teach Cece that you can't always get what you want, so she had to sit and watch other children enjoying the ice cream while she couldn't have any. Shanann burst in fury when she saw that Cece was in proximity to the ice cream, and she accused Cindy of trying to kill her. The women had a huge argument which resulted in Cindy kicking them out of the house, and Shanann swore that she was never going to go back. That is the gist of what happened, but everyone has different recollections, but that is the most consistent thing about this argument. After being kicked out, Shanann texts Chris telling him that he needs to speak to his dad and get all of this straightened out. Chris agreed and sided with Shanann, saying that he wasn't happy with what had happened. Cindy would later say that she had no idea about Cece's allergies, which she is your granddaughter and coming up to 3, so I would have thought that you should have known about allergies. But despite that, Shanann did say that she informed Cindy about these allergies and asked Cindy to get rid of anything with tree nuts from the house. While in North Carolina, Cece celebrated her 3rd birthday, and Shanann threw her the cutest little party. Despite their argument at the house, she still extended a hand, inviting Cindy and Ronnie to the party, but they didn't bother going, just like how they never attended the wedding. For the first 5 weeks that Shanann and the girls were in North Carolina, Chris would spend most of his time with Nicole, seeing her 4 or 5 times a week, and this is when they began getting physical, intimate with each other. By this point, Nicole knew that Chris was married and that he had 2 daughters, but he told Nicole that he and Shanann were in the process of separating, conveniently leaving out that Shanann was pregnant. Nicole always claimed that she did not know about this pregnancy until much, much later. However, something I'm going to talk about later is going to make you question that. Because Chris was spending all of his time with Nicole, his communication with Shanann was virtually non-existent. He ignored almost all of her phone calls, did not reply to almost all of her text messages, and this is really odd for Shanann, who has never experienced this from Chris before. He has always been so attentive and never ever ignored her, never mind ignoring phone calls from Bella and Cece. On the 4th of July, Chris spends the night at Nicole's house and has ignored Shanann's calls all day. He sleeps late in the next day, and when he checks his phone, he sees masses and masses of missed calls, and he just knows that Shanann is going to be mad. He goes outside and he rings her back, making an excuse about being tired from the heat and falling asleep, but as he suspects, Shanann wasn't happy. After this phone call, he decides that he's just going to head home. When he goes back into Nicole's house and tells her it's now her turn to not be happy. She thought that they were going to spend that entire day together, and when he told her no, that he was going home, that's when the penny dropped for Nicole, and she realised she wasn't Chris's priority, and she started to grow jealous. She later shows up at Chris's house unannounced and uninvited, stating that she wanted to help Chris draft up a healthy meal plan. For a while he had been on like a weight loss and fitness journey, so that kind of makes sense, but I wonder if that was just an excuse to go over. A few days later, Chris and Nicole have a 2-minute phone call, and then for the rest of the afternoon and well into the night, their phone connects to different routers in several different bars and restaurants, so it's likely that him and Nicole went out together that night too. After again ignoring Shanann, living life like he's some sort of bachelor with no responsibilities, he texts her the next day apologising for not replying to her, once again using the excuse that he fell asleep, and assured her that he loves her so much. Shanann questioned him, asking if he was okay, and expressed that he was making her feel like he didn't want to talk to her, an awful feeling to have. Chris apologises, once again reassuring Shanann, and tells her that he's got a lot going on at work and that he loved her to the moon and back. She replies saying that she loves him, misses him, and wishes that he wanted to talk to her. On the 14th of July, Chris takes Nicole on a date to a car museum, and something happened on that day, potentially on that date, that made him decide that he didn't want the life that he was living, a life that so many people can only dream of. A loving, devoted wife, beautiful daughters who adored him, a big, beautiful house, cars, a steady job. Instead, he wanted a life with Nicole. He spoke to Shanann that night, this being one of the only times he bothered to speak to her, and flat out said that he didn't want to be with her and that he didn't want this new baby. Imagine that from Shanann's side. Chris has been cold with her. He's made this excuse saying, oh, work's been busy, I'm under a lot of stress, blah, 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 but I love you to the moon and back. And then when he finally decides to speak to her, he doesn't want to be with her, and he doesn't want the new baby that they had both agreed that they wanted. This was absolutely devastating for Shanann. She had felt the shift in their relationship, and she had tried to ask Chris what was going on, but he was shutting her out, and then all of a sudden he wants to break up just like that. Along with the devastation, Shanann felt really confused. Just weeks before she announced her pregnancy to Chris, a pregnancy that he wanted, that they had tried for, and now he's changed his mind, and she's already over 12 weeks along. In an attempt to hold on to her husband to help their marriage, Shanann suggests therapy or marriage counselling, but Chris flat out refuses. On the 17th of July, so this is on Cece's birthday, when Shanann is thousands of miles away throwing her party and celebrating the 3rd year of their daughter's life, Chris has Nicole at their home. And this time Nicole really takes in the home and the life that Chris has. He described in a book written by Enquiries, saying that Nicole took in the framed happy pictures on the wall, the framed achievements hanging up, a beautiful home, and she asks Chris, quote, "You have all this, more than most people, and why are we doing this? Are you willing to give all this up? Is your relationship with your wife that bad?" He tells Nicole that it is, and supposedly this is when Chris reveals to her that Shanann is pregnant. Nicole would later say that she didn't know about the pregnancy at this point though. According to Chris, after he told her this, Nicole went absolutely berserk and she screamed at him saying, "Well, what the fuck are you doing with me then?" before storming out of the house and going to sit in the truck. He admitted that this tantrum that Nicole threw turned him on. It aroused him. He liked it. He liked how feisty and fiery she was, and they ended up going back to Nicole's house where they got intimate many times. Reminder, on his daughter's birthday. While they were there, they took sexy pictures and nude selfies together. Chris would save these photos the next day and he put them into a secret app that he had on his phone. Now the little icon looks like a calculator, but when you press on it, you input a certain code with the numbers and then it unlocks. On the 24th, Shanann reaches out to Chris and she tells him that she's figured it out. She knows what the problem is in their marriage. The problem is that there are only one-sided feelings, which are coming from Shanann, and she tells him that she can't go back to Colorado with their relationship in the condition that it is. She almost begs Chris to try and meet her halfway. Chris half-asses a response similar to his others. He's sorry, he loves her, no genuine thought, love, care, compassion, anything in their messages. Shanann took this as an opportunity to really vent to him about how she felt, and probably to blow off some steam as well. She wrote, quote, "I try to give you space, but while you're working and living the bachelor life, I'm carrying our third and fighting with our 2 kids daily, trying to work and make money. It's not hard texting love you and miss you. If you don't mean it, then I get it, but we need to talk." That same day, Nicole Kessinger Googles, quote, "The man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife." This is just one of many weird and shady Google searches made by Nicole. Chris also takes to Google the following day, searching things such as, quote, "When to say I love you in a new relationship," and, quote, "How does it feel when someone says I love you?" These are searches that are being made by a married man. Surely he should know how it feels when someone tells you that they love you. On the 28th, Chris and Nicole go on another date and they go to some sand dunes where they took some infamous selfies and videos of each other. Chris records Nicole and I don't know, what's it called, like sand surfing? She's on like a board and she's almost surfing down the dunes. Here is a clip of it.
There you go, baby. You're so damn sexy.
Nicole then records a video for Chris where she is speaking directly to the camera. She says, quote, "I'm having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast." And she rounds off the video by blowing him a kiss.
Thank you so much for coming out here with me, Christopher. I'm having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast. I am so out of breath.
As planned, on the 31st of July, Chris flew out to North Carolina to spend a week there with his family before flying back to Colorado with them. Before going, he leaves Nicole a couple of love letters behind. In one of them, he wrote in part, quote, "Big things will happen this year. Dreams will come true. You are truly an amazing, inspirational, and electric woman that takes my breath away every time I see you." Upon his arrival at the airport, Shanann films Chris coming down the escalator and their reunion, but it fails off. Bella and Cece run to their dad, who they haven't seen and barely spoken to in 5 weeks, and they run up to him and excitedly hug him. Chris gives them a squeeze, but he doesn't pick them up or anything, and he's not really showing any sort of excitement. It's not until he's further down the corridor that he kneels down and gives them a proper hug, one that you would expect from a father. He embraces Shanann, giving her a quick peck, and then that's it. On Chris's first night in North Carolina, Shanann complained of a headache, and Chris offers to go and get her some painkillers. He alleges in the book that I've referenced earlier, written by Enquiries, that instead of getting Shanann some paracetamol or something like that, he gave her 80 milligrams of oxycodone. Oxycodone is a severe painkiller that when pregnant you're advised to not take because it is so strong. It can be really dangerous to the baby. He gave her this in such a high dosage in hopes that it would cause Shanann to have a miscarriage. How evil is that? Chris believed that it would be easier for him to be with Nicole if there wasn't a third baby. He does not care. The oxycodone made Shanann very nauseous and she was up most of the rest of that night being sick. Her family would later comment that she had been totally fine and healthy the whole time while she was there, right up until that first night with Chris. So Shanann sort of had a signal that she would use to show Chris that she wanted to get intimate. She hadn't seen her husband in a couple of weeks, and so she gave him the signal, which for her was having a nighttime shower. So one evening, she jumped in the shower on a night, giving Chris this signal in hopes of getting some sort of affection and intimacy from Chris. After having the night shower, Chris supposedly blows her off, rejecting her. He is not interested in getting intimate, but what he is interested in is getting on the floor and pushing out a couple of push-ups. Shanann texts one of her friends relaying what happened onto them, sharing that she was so upset and that she just wanted to cry. She didn't understand how after 5 weeks apart, he wasn't all over her. Instead, he was being distant. He was being cold, showing no emotion, no affection, not being the touchy-feely, lovey-dovey, ordinary person that he was. And this is when she suspected that he must be getting it from somewhere else. When confronted with this, Chris obviously denies it, saying that there is no one else, nothing is wrong, but his actions aren't reflecting that. Throughout his time in North Carolina, he is in almost constant communication with Nicole, which is a stark difference to how he was when he was away from Shanann. While Chris was away in North Carolina with his family, Nicole spent one night looking at wedding dresses for over 2 hours. Chris would later say that while he was here, away from Nicole and with his actual family, that he decided what he was going to do. He knew that he couldn't have the best of both worlds, and he made his decision that in order to live peacefully with Nicole, he had to get rid of his family. When the Wattses arrived back in Colorado, Shanann is updating several of her friends about what's going on with Chris. She seemed to be in very slightly better spirits because Chris had spoken to her more on their way home, but he still wasn't his normal self. That night, Shanann tries once again to get intimate with Chris and he rejects her again, which resulted in Shanann having a breakdown. She burst into tears and flat out asked Chris who he was sleeping with, where he was getting it from. I'm not certain exactly when, but shortly after coming back from North Carolina, Chris went to Nicole's house where she presents him with a house key. This showing that she believes their relationship is getting more serious, and this is her kind of cementing her intentions of wanting a serious relationship with Chris. The day after arriving back from North Carolina, so this is the 8th of August, Shanann and Chris go to an ultrasound appointment to see their baby. Chris was described as being indifferent at the appointment. He wasn't really interested and not excited in the slightest. Shanann lovingly reached her hand out to Chris as she is lay on the chair during the ultrasound to embrace him, and he pulled away from her. Shanann again vented to her friends, expressing how worried she felt about potentially being a single mom to 3 children, how she could never afford that in Colorado, and most importantly, how much she desperately wanted things to work with Chris. On this night, Shanann brought it up to Chris how he had been acting towards her, giving her the cold shoulder, and she wanted to talk about it. She wanted to sort it. She wanted to save their marriage, but that was one-sided because he didn't. He took himself downstairs, waited until Shanann was asleep, and then rang Nicole, chatting to her all night long. He would then sleep in the basement for the next 2 nights. When they were told that their baby was a boy, Shanann was overjoyed. Chris had really wanted a baby boy, and now she was carrying their son, so maybe she thought that this could help build a bridge and fix their relationship. Maybe this is what they needed. This would make Chris more excited about the pregnancy and the new baby. That emotion would then carry over to their marriage, and in all, they would feel tons better. But again, that didn't happen. Meanwhile, on this day, Nicole is Googling, quote, "marrying your mistress." Shanann had confronted Chris asking what was going on, but he had never gave. He never admitted to having an affair or gave Shanann a reason for his change in demeanour. She spoke to her friends and said that the only thing that had happened between them was that big argument over Cindy, over her having the ice cream around Cece, which she was allergic to. So with Chris denying that Shanann had done anything wrong and denying seeing someone else, Shanann thought that it must have been the argument that had caused the rift. That was the only thing that she could narrow it down to. Despite probably wanting nothing more to do with them, Shanann attempted to fix what had happened, and she texted Chris's parents trying to reconcile, sending them a photo of the ultrasound of their grandson. And can you imagine what they done? They ignored her. Shanann was due to go to Arizona with Lavelle on a works conference / training type thing. She actually planned on cancelling the trip because of the strain between herself and Chris, but he persuaded her to go, promising her that they would talk through their problems when she got home. They would get the girls babysat and they'd book a night away somewhere and they'd sit. They'd sort out their problems, they'd fix their marriage. In reality though, Chris had no intentions of doing that. He saw this as another opportunity to spend time with Nicole. Shanann had asked Chris that if she bought him a couples counselling book, would he read it while she was away? She had already asked him if he would go to a therapist, go to counselling, and he had already refused, so she thought maybe the book would help. He promised her that he would, and so she ordered it from Amazon, but when it arrived, he didn't even open the package and just threw the book straight in the bin. Before leaving for Arizona, Shanann wrote Chris a letter where she poured her heart out to him. There's a sentence on the first page where she wrote, quote, "Our daughter's life can't be replaced." And that really struck with me, knowing that by the time Shanann had wrote those very true words, Chris had already decided that he was going to kill all of them. The next morning, which is the 10th of August, Shanann Watts, who was in Arizona, texts Chris saying, quote, "I miss and love you so much. I am still in shock that we are having a little boy. I'm so excited and happy. Thank you for letting me hold you this morning. It felt good. Your letter is on the counter." She hasn't even been gone 24 hours when Chris is arranging to get Bella and Cece babysat so that he can go out with Nicole. His daughters, who had just been gone on a 5-week-long holiday without him, not bothered out seeing them, he wants to go with his mistress. He takes Nicole to a restaurant called the Lazy Dog where they run up a bill of $63. For the first time since their relationship started, Chris pays for this on his bank card, which has his shared account with Shanann on. Any other time he took Nicole out, he would use either cash or gift cards to pay, so that way Shanann wouldn't be able to see or track the transaction. Him using his bank card on this evening shows that at this point, he isn't even bothered about trying to hide the affair anymore, and to Nicole, it was pleasing for her that he had done this. Shanann obviously saw the transaction, and she rang Chris to ask about it. Where was he? Who was he with? Why was his bill so high? Chris told her that he was out with a couple of his friends, that he got his dinner, he got some salmon, and that he had a beer. Shanann done something that I think a lot of us would probably do in her position. She pulled up the menu to the Lazy Dog and tallied up how much Chris's bill should have been if he had only gotten a salmon and a beer, and his total should have came to $30. So where was the other half of the bill? After their date, Chris went back to Nicole's house and later said that they'd done things that he is very ashamed of and that he will take to his grave. I don't know what that means. Is that sexual stuff? Or is that talking / planning about the upcoming murder or something else? Another thing he would later say was that after this date, he knew there was no going back to Shanann or rekindling things with her. He arrives back home to Bella and Cece at 10:30 p.m, which was half an hour late. He did not care anymore. The 12th of August, the last day of Bella and Cece's life, they had had a fun-filled day. They watched cartoons, they went shopping for a birthday present for a party that they were attending that afternoon. At the party, they had fun playing with water balloons, and Chris watched on, knowing that that would be the last party that they ever attended. During this time here, he texted one of his co-workers about a work site saying that they didn't need to bother going, he would go alone the next morning. They ate leftover pizza for dinner and FaceTimed with Frank, who said that nothing at all seemed different with Chris on the FaceTime call. Nothing to suggest what he had planned. But Chris was different. He wasn't being attentive to the girls as he usually would. He took them to a party where there was a paddling pool, where he knew they were going to get wet, but didn't bother to bring them any towels. He was short-tempered with the girls and admitted that they irritated him all day long, which is something that he would have never said before. All day long, he was texting back and forth with Nicole, prioritising her need for attention over his girls. Chris would describe the activities of their final day by saying that they, quote, had an epic time. He bathed the girls, read them a bedtime story, and took them in for the last time. In his own words, he said, quote, August 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before, and I did nothing to stop it. He spent almost 2 hours on the phone with Nicole that night. According to Chris, they were having phone sex, but Nicole has always said that she can't recall what they spoke about, not a single hint on what was said throughout a 2-hour-long conversation. In Arizona, it was glaringly clear to everyone around her that Shanann wasn't herself. She was usually the life and soul of the party. She was so lively, energetic, happy and bubbly, but this time she couldn't have been more different. Her friend said that she had been really down the entire trip. She wasn't eating, and she just wasn't herself, and it wasn't because she was pregnant. I can imagine that after all that was going on, Shanann just wanted to be back home. She wanted to get her marriage on track. There was nothing else on her mind. She wanted to be her usual happy self again. All of these feelings must have physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted her. She had just done a 6-week holiday where she had to practically beg for her husband to communicate with her. Chris telling her that they weren't compatible anymore, that he didn't want the baby. Chris's lack of love and affection, and just his straight up coldness, and then her worries about his infidelity. All of that is enough to wear anyone down. She rings Chris from the airport to tell him that her flight is delayed, which is frustrating, but then just to generally chat. He then cuts her off though, because he's more interested in once again getting a workout in. Chris later admitted that he was angry that the flight was delayed, not because a delayed flight is annoying and frustrating anyways, but because he was hyping himself up, preparing for what he was about to do. They texted each other for a little bit, Shanann asking Chris what he would like for his tea the next day, if he wanted her to go out to pick anything up. He asks her to pick up broccoli and green beans, seemingly by offering to do something for him. That's the only way Shanann can get him to talk. She again vents to one of her friends about the whole situation, and one of the text messages that she got from her friends just sent a shiver down me spine. The friend reassures Shanann, telling her that she's a brilliant wife and that, quote, he would kill for you. Shanann is dropped off at home by her friend Nicole Atkinson at 1:48 a.m. The Ring doorbell captures her entering her home for the final time. She gets in and kicks off her daily flip-flops, pops her head in the girls' bedroom, flings off her clothes, pulls on a t-shirt, and then climbs into bed, still wearing her makeup because she's too tired to take it off. She attempts to hug Chris, and miraculously, he lets her. They begin to kiss and eventually got intimate before Shanann fell asleep. Chris explains in his own words within the book by TrueCrimeCaitlyn, which he basically collaborated with her on, hence why I keep referring to it, explaining his first attempt at murdering Bella and Cece. This is a direct quote. Quote, August 13th, the morning of. I went to the girls' bedroom first before Shanann and I had our argument. I went to Bella's room, then Cece's room, and used a pillow from their bed to kill them. After feeling satisfied that he had murdered his babies, he goes back into the bedroom and wakes Shanann, instigating an argument with her, telling her that their marriage is over and that it wasn't going to work. He is doing this after hugging, kissing, and getting intimate with her in bed just hours before. Apparently, Shanann argued back that he would never see Bella or Cece again, and this is when he put his hands around her throat and began to strangle her. Chris remembers apparently having no control over his actions at this point. He knew that if he released his hands, Shanann would live, but to him now, she is nothing more than an obstacle in his way of his life with Nicole, and she needed to be eliminated, out of the picture, gone. He remembers Shanann's mascara running from her eyes and smearing across her face. He remembers her eyes filling with blood. Meanwhile, Shanann looks into her husband's eyes, the man that she loves, the man that she thanked God for, as he is killing her, squeezing the life out of her. And the last sentence that she ever heard was Chris telling her that he didn't love her. Following this, Chris was aghast to see Bella and Cece had walked into the bedroom, that they had both not only survived, but witnessed what he had done. Chris described Bella saying that she had bruising around her eyes and that they both looked like they had been seriously hurt. In his own words, he said, quote, "I was wrapping her up in the bedsheet when the girls came walking into the room. I don't know how it could be possible, but they were both up and walking around. I knew if Nikki and I were going to be together, I had to kill all of them. I could not comfort my girls. I had no desire to." Bella asked what was wrong with Mummy, and Chris assured her that Mummy was going to be okay. He would lie Shanann's wrapped body on the floor and slid her down the stairs. Apparently her dead weight was too heavy for him to carry, or he just had not an ounce of respect left for Shanann. He left her body by the door while he ran outside to get his truck, which he then reversed onto the driveway, something that was picked up by a neighbour's camera, which has now become infamous. He later expressed that in this moment, he felt furious that Bella and Cece had survived, that they were running around the house, crying, whimpering, scared, asking repeatedly if their mommy was okay. He was angry that his plan of killing the girls hadn't worked. He wanted to, quote, protect them from seeing everything that he was doing, but he had failed, and as he said, he had no interest in consoling his distressed daughters. Chris also later said that in this moment, he believed that the girl's survival was one of many warnings he had experienced from God, urging him to stop. Maybe Shanann's delayed flight was the first sign, but either way, Chris didn't want to, couldn't, or wouldn't stop what he was doing. It was around 5:15 a.m. when Chris is seen on the neighbour's CCTV camera pulling up his truck and loading it. Shanann's body was dragged to the back seat where she was placed on the floor alongside bags of rubbish. Chris loaded the truck with a shovel, rake, gas can and his dinner for work. He then went back in the house and told Bella and Cece to follow him out to the truck, and poor Bella tried to protest, telling her dad that they needed their car seats, but he assured her that they would be fine without them just this once. It breaks me heart thinking that 4-year-old Bella is asking for her car seat because it's unsafe for her and her sister to be in the car without one, but she has no idea that she is being led to her death. Chris is driving his dead wife and 2 daughters to an oil site that he knows through his job. This was the one that he was texting his co-worker about while he was at the kids' party. The site was called Survey 319, and for the whole 1 hour, 40-mile drive there, Chris is sweating and shaking and holding on to his anger towards Bella and Cece for not being dead. At this point, he considers them, quote, another thing to deal with. In the back seat, the girls could see their mother's wrapped body lay at their feet. They were whimpering, kind of drifting in and out of sleep, and they were holding each other, comforting each other. When arriving at Survey 319, Chris first took out Shanann's body and lay her on the ground. He walked back to the truck where, using her comfort blanket, somewhere she would go nowhere without, he smothered Cece by putting it over her head. He did this in front of Bella, who was obviously distraught. He would carry Cece's body up the ladders to the oil tanks, opened up one of the hatches, and then lowered her body inside. As he lowered her tiny body into the huge tanks, he knew in his heart that he would never see her again, but he felt no love for her and let her drop in, waiting to hear her body splash into the oil. Without any reluctance or hesitation, he went back to the truck for Bella. She heartbreakingly cried to her dad, asking if he was going to do the same thing to her what he had just done to Cece. Using the same blanket, he began trying to smother Bella too, but was thrown off by how much she tried to fight back. Bella pleaded to Chris, saying, "Daddy, no," but nothing was going to stop him now. He killed her, smothering her too. Chris then carried Bella's body up to the oil tanks and placed her into one separate from Cece. When opening the hatch on this oil tank, Chris took in just how small the opening was. The diameter of the hatch was only about 8 inches, which was actually too small to put Bella's body through. This meant that he had to physically shove Bella's arms and shoulders to get her inside. A small piece of her hair was later found on the hatch, having been ripped out in this process. Chris would admit that he had put the girls in the tanks so that they couldn't get back up for a second time, basically to make sure that they would stay dead. If the smothering didn't kill them, then drowning in oil would. How barbaric is that? Chris then took to burying Shanann in a shallow grave. He used the shovel and dug 8 inches into the ground, thinking to himself about how easy it was because of the loose mud. He then pulled the bed sheet and sort of let Shanann roll into the shallow grave. She landed face down and he left her like that, reburying her. After burying Shanann, a sense of freedom washed over Chris. He was free to be with Nicole with no worries or no ties to anything else, and in this moment, his love for Nicole amplified. He was on top of the world and ready for this new life. After callously killing his daughters and then dumping the bodies of his family, Chris quite calmly went to a shop and bought himself some breakfast. He had worked up an appetite. He then went on to work where he acted as if it was a totally normal day. His colleagues said that Chris was nothing out of the ordinary, that the only difference in him being that his clothes weren't as neat as they usually were. He didn't look as put together. At around 8:30 a.m, Chris rang Primrose Daycare, the private nursery where Bella and Cece attended, and unenrolled them, telling the person on the phone that they wouldn't be returning. This immediately struck us odd, as only very recently Shanann had expressed her excitement about the girls going back to the nursery. After this, he then contacted their realtor to discuss selling their house. The realtor created a group message with both Chris and Shanann in to discuss the property, and she at one point even commented that Shanann hadn't weighed in on any of the conversation, and Chris tells her that Shanann hasn't been around all day. None of this ever made sense to me, not that any of what he done did, but what was his plan? His genuine plan? Did he think that none of this would have been picked up on? Did he really think that he was going to get away with it? He felt such little care and love towards Shanann that he must have thought that she wasn't worthy of love from anyone. But that is where Chris Watts was terribly mistaken. Shanann was very much loved by the people surrounding her, and it would be the love and care of a friend that Chris could have never predicted that would shine a light on the horrific acts that he committed. Nicole Atkinson, who had dropped Shanann off the night before, had been texting Shanann throughout the morning, but was getting no response, which was unusual. She knew Shanann had been feeling a bit down and that she had an appointment that morning, so she wanted to be a supportive friend and check up on her. Nicole had been sending text messages since before 9 a.m, and although it was weird that Shanann wasn't responding, initially she tried not to worry. They had gotten in late, maybe Shanann had slept in, or maybe she was soaking in time with Bella and Cece, who she had missed while she was in Arizona. But as the hours went by and text after text went unanswered, Nicole knew something wasn't right. At around 12 p.m, she and her son got into the car and drove over to the Watts house. When they arrived, Nicole knocks on the door and looks into the house, but it's empty, still and silent. She messages Chris expressing her worry that she hadn't heard back from Shanann and that she's at the house and that she's knocking, no one's answering, but she can see Shanann's car in the garage. Chris replies making some sort of excuse, saying that Shanann had gone out on a play date and told Nicole to go away. But Nicole is stood outside of the house and she can see Shanann's white Lexus, which still has the girls' car seats inside. She knew Shanann and she knew that she would never take the girls out, especially without their car seats, so this was really off to her. Nicole again goes to the door and peers inside. She can see Shanann's daily shoes still at the door through a glass pane window. The door has a Ring doorbell on it, so when she approaches it, Chris gets a notification sent to his phone. He rings her again and tells her to leave, and she responds saying no, she's actually going to call the police. After hanging up on Chris, Nicole rings the doctor's office where Shanann was supposed to go for her appointment. Is there a possibility that she could still be sat there, that something was wrong there? Maybe she had gotten an Uber or something to the doctor's. And the receptionist tells her that Shanann didn't show up for the appointment. Now at this point, Nicole is filled with worry. Shanann would not miss an appointment, especially without ringing ahead to cancel for some reason. At this point, she does not care that Chris said not to call the police. She dials 911 into her phone and requests that an officer conducts a welfare check on her friend Shanann Watts. Nicole then tells Chris that she's called the police and Chris begins to make his way home.
How you guys doing? What's that?
Do you remember me?
Yeah.
Hey man,
How you been?
Hi.
You Nicole?
Yes.
Okay. What's going on?
So my friend, we were out of town for a business trip this weekend.
Right.
And I dropped her off at 2 o'clock this morning. She's 15 weeks pregnant. She wasn't feeling well. And she had a doctor's appointment this morning at 9. And I told her to let me know if she needed me to take her. She's got 2 little girls. And she was very distraught over the weekend, wasn't eating normally or drinking, and we kept trying to force it on her because she's pregnant. Her husband and her supposedly are separating, but she didn't know this. She thought they were just having issues. He disclosed that to me today.
Okay.
Because I called him and I was like, have you talked or heard from Shanann since she left for work this morning? Because I can't get a hold of her. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage. Her shoes she wears every single day are right in the front door.
She only has one vehicle?
No, they only have the one vehicle in his work truck.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. There's not a...
The girls and went on a play date, but they're 4 and 2. She went on a play date. Why wouldn't she take in a car? They're both in car seats.
The officer explains to Nicole that he can't force entry into the house, so he basically does what Nicole had already done. He knocks on the door, he does a sweep around the property. At one point, he shouts over to a neighbour who's in their yard, asking if they'd seen Shanann, but all of this turned up nothing. One thing he did notice was that the door was locked from the inside, so whoever had left the house had not gone through this door. Nicole is now on the phone to Sandy and relays her worries onto Shanann's mum. She's asking for a code for the garage to see if they could open it and then get in the house that way, but it turns out that that feature is actually broken. Sandy says that Chris told her that Shanann was at a friend's house, which is exactly what he told Nicole, but that's not checking out. He eventually pulls up 17 minutes after the officer's arrival and introduces himself to the officer, quickly shaking his hand. He doesn't necessarily seem rushed, worried, or in any sort of particular hurry. He opens the garage door and firstly goes to the Lexus and looks inside there. It was immediately noted that Chris didn't call out their names. He didn't go into the house and shout, Shanann, Bella, Cece, are yous here, where yous at, or anything like that. He didn't even rush into the house to try and look around for them. Instead, he stopped to look in the car. The car's there, we can see that they're not in the car, so he's doing this probably just to stall for a couple of seconds while he's gathering his thoughts. And this doesn't reflect what the officer is expecting him to do. You would think that if he was filled with urgency and panic and worry, that he would burst into the house and he would shout out their names, hoping to hear a response, but he did neither of these things. And that's because he knew they weren't in the house. Chris opens up the front door and gives permission for the officer to step inside, and Nicole just walks right in. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of what followed, but if you do want to watch the entire body cam footage, you can find that on YouTube. So the officer looks around and at first glance, nothing looks out of place. The bed sheets from Shanann, Bella and Cece's beds were all gone though, and Chris mentions that the girls' comfort blankets are also gone and they never leave them behind. He then asks the officer if he should jump into his car and start driving around looking for her. To me, this immediately read as just more stalling. He needs more time to come up with a story. Or maybe he was planning to just leg it.
Sorry about that. That was mean, you think it's smart just drive around, see if
Probably not, because, I mean, you don't know what car she's in, where she's at. I mean, obviously you're not going to see her car. It's here.
Upstairs, Shanann's phone is eventually found and switched on, which is an immediate red flag. Shanann's phone, as Chris said, was her lifeline, and she would never ever leave without it. When it's switched on, it blows up with tons of missed calls and worried messages from other friends, Nicole Atkinson and then Chris himself. This is one of the final clips that I'll play from this body cam footage because I don't want to just bombard you with it, but I do want you to hear this, just to hear the difference in Nicole and Chris's tone upon finding the phone.
Her phone's here? Her phone's here.
Does she work?
Yeah, she works from home.
Oh, from home?
She works, this is her lifeline.
Yeah, that thing turns back on, it's gonna start blowing up.
Oh yeah, trust me.
Nicole was the one who found Shanann's bag, and she goes through it, pulling out Shanann's medication, which is another thing that she would never part with. Back upstairs, Chris walks into the bedroom and moments later emerges with Shanann's wedding ring. A neighbour of the Watts family named Nathaniel tells the officer that he has a CCTV camera that looks onto the street and the officer's welcome to come and have a look at the footage. Both the officer and Chris head next door to watch. The footage shows Chris reversing the truck up to the garage and loading items inside. Because the footage is sort of grainy and it's not directly onto the Watts' driveway, you can't really make out exactly what it is, but we now know that it was Shanann's body. The footage captures Chris driving off and nothing else relevant after that. It doesn't capture Shanann or the girls leaving for a play date like Chris had told Nicole that she had gone on. While watching the CCTV, Chris's body language is speaking volumes. Again, the footage is all on YouTube if you want to go and watch it to get the proper atmosphere and be able to see it all. So initially, he stood on his phone very nervously. He's swaying, he kind of keeps still. He then puts his hand on his head, he's sweating, he knocks his sunglasses off, and he's over-explaining to the officers his reasons for reversing his truck onto the garage. Honestly, I do recommend you go and watch this footage because within it, you just need to see the way Nathaniel's looking at Chris. He is not buying what Chris is selling. This is something he had never done. The truck would sometimes leak oil and Shanann didn't want the driveway getting dirty and stained, so he would almost always keep the truck out on the street, never on the drive. So when he done this, it obviously stuck out to Nathaniel. When Nathaniel shuts off the CCTV, it goes back onto regular TV, and one of the first adverts that comes on is for the new season of American Horror Story. The advert shows a baby in a womb and then pans down to a heart drenched in black oil. Many people believe that this was Shanann sending a message, and I personally do believe in all that, so I do believe that to be true. I know many people won't, but I just think that's hard to deny. What a huge coincidence that is. Knowing that Shanann is pregnant with a baby, and knowing that Bella and Cece are at that moment in time in oil. It's upon seeing this ad that Chris tells the officer about Shanann's pregnancy. He eventually leaves and the officer tells Chris that he's going to stop back to get Nathaniel's information. Nathaniel tells the officer that Chris isn't acting right at all, even pointing out that it's strange for him to pull his truck up onto the driveway.
No.
He's never fidgety, he's never rocking back and forth, and if you look, he never loads his stuff in and out of the garage ever.
Right.
But watch, you'll see him get out, and he walks back and forth a couple times. He's normally, you can ask them, he's normally quiet, real subdued. He's over here telling you 3 times what he took out, what he did. He's very, he never talks. So the fact that he's over here blabbing his mouth makes me kind of suspicious.
Yeah, but I mean, put yourself in his situation.
Oh, I agree.
You know, anyone's going to be nervous. You don't know what to do.
No, I agree, but I'm just saying the way he told you 3 times what he brought with him, why is he telling you exactly what he brought with him and instead of saying, oh, they didn't see anybody out here, didn't see anybody doing anything. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Why is he so worried about you knowing what he's carrying out? That's all I'm saying.
That very same night, Chris Watts gets to work erasing any trace of Nicole Kessinger from his phone, erasing their call log, their text messages, etc. He speaks to Nicole on the phone for 51 minutes that night. The day after the disappearance/murder of Shanann, Bella and Cece, Chris receives a call from the police department to get information about their appearances. So hair colour, eye colour, height, weight, any identifiable scars, tattoos, that type of thing. It's noted that when the department made this call to Chris, he never asked about progress in the investigation or if they were calling because the girls had been found. Local news outlets arrived to kind of interview Chris and give him the opportunity to plead for his family to come home. After these interviews aired, many people all across the country speculated about his involvement. Throughout the interview, he stands with his arms crossed, he's very closed off, his voice seems shaky, again he's swaying, and he smiles many times. One of the reporters straight out asks him where his family is, and he smirks, saying he doesn't know. He's asked by a reporter if he thinks that Shanann and the girls had just taken off, and this is his response.
She was busy, but when her friend showed up, that's what was like, it registered like, all right, this isn't right.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now, I don't even want to just like throw anything out there. Like, I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe, like, I want them back now. Like that's what's in my head. Like, if they're safe right now, they're gonna come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. Like, if they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just like barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here.
On this day, Nicole Kessinger Googles Shanann's name, which, okay, I could understand that the man you're seeing, his wife and children have gone missing. I would think that Nicole would want to see what was going on with the investigation, so I can understand that. But she then goes on to Google about police being able to trace and recover deleted text messages. Is there a correlation between the two there? When Chris is formally questioned by the FBI, they ask him to elaborate on the, quote, emotional conversation he and Shanann had that he had mentioned previously. And I'm going to go over this very, very briefly. Again, all of the interrogation footage is on YouTube if you want to go watch it. Chris explained that while Shanann was away in North Carolina, he felt that he had found himself, who he truly was, and when they reunited, he no longer felt their spark. He told Shanann that he wanted to separate and that he didn't love her. This is when Shanann supposedly said that he would never see the girls again. The agent asked Chris what his guts telling him has happened. He said he initially thought that Shanann had taken the girls to a friend's house just to have a play date, blow off a bit steam, maybe slag them off a little bit. But now he's not so sure about that after all of the searches and the news broadcasts, etc. He now believes that someone has took his family. He knows that there's no sign of forced entry into the house, so makes a point of saying, quote, if someone took her, it had to be someone she knew, because there's no sign of anything, like being disturbed or broken. During this interview, Chris denies having an affair. It's noted that he has almost zero marks on him, no scratches, scrapes, bruising, or anything to indicate that he had been involved in any sort of struggle. Shanann's dad Frank later said that due to the lack of abrasions on Chris, he believes that he actually murdered Shanann in her sleep. There was no way that Shanann would have gone down without a fight, especially leaving her daughters behind. Chris later confessed to drugging Shanann with more oxycodone and waited until she was in a state where she was unable to defend herself, and that is where he began to strangle her. Chris is then asked by the FBI agent if he is open to taking a polygraph test, which is basically a lie detector, and he agrees. During this test, he is asked several different questions, including, quote, do you know where Shanann is now? Did you physically cause Shanann's disappearance? Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann? The polygraph examination would show that he was being deceitful. He was lying through his back teeth. Despite this though, he still denied having any involvement with the disappearance of his family and is not budging. But he does eventually begin to admit cheating on Shanann. He tells the agents about first laying eyes on Nicole, how she, quote, took his breath away, and how he had spent the majority of the 5 weeks that Shanann was away with Nicole. Going back to Shanann after admitting the affair, Chris said, quote, I didn't hurt her. I cheated on her. I hurt her emotionally. Maybe he was revealing this thinking that the agents would think that that's why he failed the polygraph test. But by the time Chris reveals his relationship with Nicole to the FBI, they already knew about the affair. That's because Nicole came to them. Nicole Kessinger was interviewed by the FBI after she voluntarily went to them. She claimed to be worried about Shanann, Bella and Cece after seeing everything that was being said in the news. It was supposedly from the news broadcasts that she found out that Shanann was pregnant. Like I said earlier, Chris claimed to have told her when she was in his house on Cece's birthday. So you can choose who to believe, but I still think that Nicole knew earlier, which I will get into. She tells the agent how her and Chris had met at work. Chris had approached her, not wearing his wedding ring, and she found him attractive. She admitted knowing that Chris had a wife, but said she believed that they were in the middle of getting a divorce. She tells the agent how Chris already having kids did make her feel uncomfortable, but she apparently never expressed the feeling of uncomfort to him. It was said that she told Chris that she wanted to give him his first son and that this may have further motivated him to commit the murders after Shanann found out that she was carrying a boy. Throughout the questioning, Nicole is very monotone and hardly uses Shanann, Bella and Cece's names when talking about them. She tells the agent how she became suspicious of Chris when, by day 2, Shanann still hadn't shown up, and she gives her own justification as to why she had deleted their thread of text messages. Have a listen to this.
Just don't want anybody to get some of those texts. Like, they have nothing to do with this case, and they're just like...
Between you and Chris?
Yes, they're just...
So, just tell me what you're...
They're just kind of raunchy.
Okay,
like, I don't need anybody...
Everybody's an adult.
Posted, like,
we're not going to
somewhere...
Post it.
I don't want the newspapers to get that. That's all I want.
The only ones that we would be looking for...
I just realized that he was lying to me, and I was like, well, if you can lie to me about this, what else are you lying to me about? And it made me realize that maybe his wife was in danger at that point, and it was day 2, too, and she still wasn't home.
What did that cause you to do with your phone, though?
Oh, what? When I deleted those? I was just kind of grossed out by him, to be honest with you. I was just like, I don't know what's going on right now, but you just lied to me, and I don't want to see this come over my phone anymore. So I removed it. So
you already said, but you removed text messages?
I deleted all of his stuff because he lied to me. I mean, that's what it was. It was the hurt that made me delete it, and then it was the lie that made me start questioning everything else he'd been telling me for the last few days.
And that's when you decided to come forward?
Yes.
Okay. So just for context,
yes.
When people delete stuff off phones, usually we go,
No. It wasn't malicious at all. It wasn't malicious at all. He lied to me. It just hurt. Like, I had never felt like he'd ever lied to me before. And it was a big lie. I mean, telling somebody that you're in the midst of a divorce and then you have a wife that has a 15-week-old baby on the way is a huge, huge thing.
When talking about Chris, she says, quote, I legitimately think his cheese was sliding off the cracker long before he met me. Back in the interrogation room with Chris, the FBI agent challenges him, asking, why hasn't he cried? His girls are missing, his daughters. He supposedly cried during this emotional conversation with Shanann, but here they are now, they are missing, and they have no idea where they are, what's happened to them, if they're safe, if they're in danger, and he sat there with eyes dry as the Sahara Desert. Chris then tearfully asks if he can speak to his father, Ronnie. They bring him into the room and then leave the men, telling them they're in no rush. Eventually, after a short while with his dad, Chris says that he no longer wants to protect Shanann and admits to murdering her. He justifies the murder by saying that after their argument, he saw Shanann strangling Bella and Cece on the baby monitor. He apparently ran into the rooms and saw both of his girls were blue in colour and that he blacked out in rage. He lost control and then strangled Shanann in retaliation. The FBI agents come back into the room and Chris relays this false story onto them. He adds how he loaded the bodies into his truck and then drove them to Survey 319 to dispose of their bodies. While relaying this, he is now crying and Ronnie is rubbing his shoulder, comforting him. Eventually, the agent shows Chris a drawn picture of Survey 319 and he asks when that photo was taken. They say that very day and asked him to point to where everyone was. On the photos, he left 3 markings. S for Shanann on the disturbed earth, B for Bella on one tank, and C for Cece on the other. Four days after the horrific murders, officers were able to recover the body of 34-year-old Shanann. She was found with the fetus of her unborn son in her underwear after suffering a prolapsed uterus caused by her death. Sandy was contacted to see if she could help with formal identification. She asked only 2 questions.
The next morning, I get a phone call and they found Shannon's body. I said, do you want me to identify her on the phone? And he said, yeah, you could do that. And I said, is she beautiful? He said, yes. I said, does she have black hair? And he said, yes. And I said, then you have my daughter.
Officers got started on retrieving Bella and Cece from the tanks, which wasn't a quick or easy task. This involved draining the 400-barrel tanks. The day after finding Shanann, Sandy is again asked to help identify who they have found. She begins to describe the girls' hair when she realises that the beautiful, fine hair of her granddaughters would be drenched in thick black oil. The officer asked her which of the girls was wearing a pull-up, and this confirmed that they had found 3-year-old Celeste. Sandy told them to keep going to find her Bella, and 2 hours later, they did. Bella was 4 years old. Sandy described in an interview with Dr. Phil that the girls' bodies were hard to extract because of the skin slippage, that their skin was coming away. Shanann, Bella, Cece and baby Nico, the name that was given to the unborn son, were all laid to rest together on the 1st of September 2018 in North Carolina, and they had an absolutely beautiful service. They share a grave with a bench where Shanann is named with her maiden name Ruzek. The name Watts is nowhere on the bench. Speaking of, the Watts family did not attend either the funeral or the burial services. On the 6th of November, as part of a plea bargain, Chris Watts pled guilty to 9 charges, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, 2 additional counts for 2 victims being under the age of 12, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a body. Because of his guilty plea, this meant that Chris avoided the death penalty, something that Shanann's family supported. They never tried to pursue a sentence of death, and Sandy said, quote, "He made the choice to take those lives. I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his." In court, both Sandy and Cindy made statements. While Cindy made her statement, she told her son Chris that she loved him and that she forgave him. When given the opportunity, Chris declined to make a statement. The judge commented, saying, quote, "This is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime I have handled out of the thousands of cases I have seen."
Words that come to mind when I hear the evidence in this case are a senseless crime and the viciousness of the crime. And equally aggravating in this court's determination is the despicable act of disposing of the bodies in the manner in which they were done in this case. I've been a judicial officer now for starting my 17th year, and I could objectively say that this is perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime that I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I have seen. And nothing less than a maximum sentence would be appropriate, and anything less than the maximum sentence would depreciate the seriousness of this offense.
Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 80 years. He will never set foot outside of a prison wall or live a free day in his life ever again. While incarcerated, Chris was placed on suicide watch. He was eventually moved facilities due to safety concerns, and he now spends his days at Dodge Correctional Institution, which is in Wisconsin, where he has gone on to re-find God and decorated his cell with pictures of Shanann, Bella, and Cece. Before we wrap up today's case, I just want to add in a couple of extra details here where I couldn't really figure out where to fit them. So the Wattses did have financial struggles. They filed for bankruptcy in 2015 and were apparently close to filing again for a second time before the murders. They had an income of around about $4,900 monthly, and their mortgage and car payments ate up most of that, not to mention having to pay for both of the girls to go to private nursery. It is suspected by some people that maybe the financial struggles is something that motivated Chris to do what he did. I also wanted to mention how shady Nicole Kessinger was. I could genuinely do an entire episode on her alone. As I said many times throughout this case, she has always claimed that when initially meeting Chris, she didn't realise that he was married. However, a search of her Google history showed that she had been searching Shanann's name since September 2017 and many times after that. Bear in mind, Chris never approached her in work until June 2018. Following that, Nicole said she had no idea that Shanann was pregnant, but Shanann posted about being pregnant several times, so you're telling us that Nicole's snooping on Shanann's profile but misses all of the pregnancy posts. More of her shady Google searches, including researching Amber Fry's network and how much money she had made from a book deal. If you're unaware who Amber Fry is, she was the mistress of Scott Peterson, who was currently incarcerated for the murder of his pregnant wife Lacey and their unborn son Connor. Nicole even searched asking if people hated Amber Fry, like she was so worried about what people were going to think of her. In the clip that I played from her FBI interview, she seemed more concerned with her and Chris's raunchy text messages getting leaked than actually finding Shanann. As I mentioned, she erased lots of pictures, text messages, etc. from her phone, but she also tried to go so far as to destroy her SIM card. On the morning of the murders, Chris left the house at around about 5 a.m. and an hour later at 6 a.m, so about the time he was pulling up to Survey 319, Nicole's phone pinged off a phone tower in proximity to the Watts' house. Nicole lived 20 minutes away, and so she had no reason to be in Frederick. Why did her phone ping there? She is kept very under the radar since the murders and only very recently has been spotted attending a funeral. In more recent years, Chris has allegedly stated that Nicole was more involved than has previously been let on, but again, he's not really delved further than that, and she has never been considered a suspect. Despite his lengthy, multiple life sentences, he hopes to be released one day.
I just want to get out of here. I know that God has a plan for me, and it's not, to be in prison right now was not stay here. Because he brought me here for a reason. But he also wants me to just put me outside. I know I just can't sit here and just wait. I know there's waiting, doing nothing, and just waiting that I'm seeking an action verb. That's what I'm doing.
Delusional. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Don't forget to follow the podcast so that you never miss a new upload. You can find photos and updates over on the Instagram at TrueCrimeCaitlyn. I appreciate you for being here, and I'll catch you all on the next one.